Matthew chapter 27. Well, Jesus woke up in the morning, though I can't imagine he slept too much. I guess he slept a little before he woke, and Jesus would be in a semi-trance, forcing himself to believe it was too late to call it off. They put him in chains and took him away. Judas lost his nut. It was all too real, this mad theater. He didn't believe he could bear the curse of his name and hung himself. Also a sin, but we are now in the business of forgiving. He threw the money at the priest, 30 pieces of silver, to finish his part in what the Jewish writers had written. I think the Jews decided to pretend not to be part of it to preserve hate for when it was needed for war. But they could see the world was big. There were other powers. Christians and Jews are like brothers, both in their genes and in their ways. They will scrap with each other, but they will not show their teeth until someone other than Coke or Pepsi comes along. Oh man. So Jesus stands before Pilate, the Roman governor, who actually would prefer peace over unruly hordes. So, are you Jesus Christ? You said it. Pilate found it amusing that Jesus didn't answer any of the silly accusations. Pilate was going to set one of the many waiting for crucifixion, this was a common way to die at the time, free to make the crowd happy. They wanted Jesus Barabbas. Now there are people who believe this was the son of Jesus. Maybe they would rather the son live, but I don't believe it, not if Jesus is 33. And of course they would think the bloodline mattered, which is ridiculous for many reasons. One, the Jews and Gentiles had extra-married all through the ages. There is very little difference in the bloodline of any humans on the planet, so forget it. It is a detail for distraction. Jesus wanted to change how we think and behave. He was not going to let the Jews let him go. The priests got the crowd to cheer, "Crucify him!" Pilate, accepting some advice from his wife, backed out of the theater. But he had Jesus whipped and put in the custody of his soldiers. The crowd, this I don't believe, took the responsibility for his death. Now the story says that in the governor's palace, Pilate is governor lest we forget, then dressed him, Jesus up in a red robe, mocked him and spit on him. This isn't likely. They likely sat down and went over details. It's going to work, Jesus. One day people will sit around and wonder about the man they called Jesus Christ. Who knows? One day we might stop beating each other over the head. Are you mocking me? No, man, I'm with you. And I'll make certain you don't die up there. So they walk on up the hill and put him on a cross. They gambled for his clothes so not to miss any part of the script. He saved others, but he can't save himself. Ain't he king of Israel? Well, yeah, he is. But who knows what that means? Well, people, the learned would know of an eclipse, and that would make it very possible that they threw Jesus up there at the time for the dramatic effect. He screams from his pain, even if he is tied and not nailed, which also is detailed distraction. Esau be avenged, into the illusion of race. We are all brothers and sisters. So they gave him his vinegar, a fine drink in the blasting sun, after the eclipse, which did not last 3 hours. Soldiers ripped the curtains in the temple, and some really absurd things like dead people jumping up out of the grave. They didn't. The soldiers declared him the Son of God, though he was actually trying to be the Father of gods. No matter how long it took and how many times someone hung him or anyone like him on a cross. Mary Magdalena, so obviously his number one love, that she was likely his wife, and Mary, his mother, and many other relatives, friends and the fans of public execution, some of them understanding the historic significance of what was happening, some believing Jesus was making a significant point. Stop hating one another. We are all brothers and sisters and have the capacity to love and care for one another and make a paradise of what we are making into a hellhole. And I believe him. And I believe he didn't believe he was God's only son. He simply knew it was worth risking his life to change the direction of mankind's pursuits. Any revelation, Joseph, either his dad or another relative or friend, with cash and influence, grabs up Jesus after 6 hours hanging. It wasn't uncommon to last 6 days. And the only way he was going to leave the tomb alive was if he wasn't already dead. It is physics. He was, in keeping with quantum thinking, either alive or dead when they carried him off to the new freshly cut into rock tomb. Now that, friends, is an undertaking requiring much money and man-hours, even if it was only big enough for 4 or 5 people to walk into. Regardless, irregardless as our preacher liked to say, his body was not there when they pushed the rock in front of it, or there was a back exit. Dead or alive, it does not matter now. It did for Jesus and family then, not now. What matters is, 2,000 years later, people still have crosses around their necks. A really silly habit. But he ain't forgot, and slowly we are understanding that what he said, some of it still is true, for other reasons. It is simply necessary to care when others live under tyranny, in poverty. They are volatile and a danger, and genocide can no longer be an option. We have to start breeding that out of our future generations. And how Jesus wasn't in the tube is of no never mind. Either he was up to go on ahead to Galilee, or they could simply put it in the story when they finally got around to writing it years later. It was a definite step, I will admit it and give credit to the storytellers, but we haven't reached the place to stand still.